The war had left Earth a graveyard of ash and silence. 14-year-old Tyler Brooks had walked through those ruins for 3 long years, scavenging for food in the burnt-out shells of cities that once teemed with millions. He remembered his parents only in fragments now, his mother's laugh, his father's calloused hands ruffling his hair. They'd hidden him in a basement shelter when the orbital strikes began, made him promise to survive no matter what. He'd kept that promise, even when keeping it hurt worse than dying. When the evacuation ships finally came, Tyler thought his nightmare was over. Massive vessels from the Galactic Council descended through the ash-choked sky, their hulls gleaming with technologies Earth had only dreamed about. Representatives from a dozen alien species moved through the refugee camps, scanning survivors and sorting them into processing lines. Tyler stood in line for 6 hours, his stomach tight with hope, clutching the small metal dog tag that was all he had left of home. The Valorian examiner was tall and crystalline, her body refracting light into rainbow patterns. She ran a scanner over Tyler's body, and he watched her translucent face shift from neutral to something like disgust. She called over her supervisor, and they spoke in clicking tones he couldn't understand. Finally, she looked down at him with eyes like fractured glass and said in perfect English, "Your genetic markers indicate old guard lineage. The Valorian sanctuaries cannot accept individuals with your predispositions." Next. Tyler didn't understand. He asked what old guard meant, what predispositions she was talking about. The examiner simply pointed to the exit and called for the next refugee. As security escorted him out, Tyler saw a Valorian child watching him with what looked like fear. He was 14 years old, weighed maybe 90 pounds soaking wet, and they were afraid of him. The Threnody hive ships were next. These aliens moved as one, thousands of insect-like beings that thought with a single shared consciousness. They didn't even scan him individually. The moment he stepped into their processing chamber, the entire swarm recoiled like he'd brought poison into their midst. A voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere said, "Individual consciousness too chaotic. Human emotional volatility incompatible with collective harmony. Rejected." Station after station, world after world, the story was the same. The Kelvin League said humans age too quickly to be worth the investment in education. The Traders Consortium said human emotional instability made them unreliable workers. The Academic Preserves said human aggression had no place in civilized society. Tyler kept a running count in his head, 23 rejections in 40 days. He watched other refugees get accepted. Saw families reunited, children placed in foster programs, adults given job training and housing. But whenever a human stepped forward, the alien processors found reasons to say no. There were maybe 200 human survivors scattered across the refugee processing centers, and Tyler watched as, one by one, they were all turned away. By the time Tyler reached the scrapyard, he'd stopped hoping for anything better. The scrapyard was what its name suggested, a massive asteroid belt filled with derelict ships, broken stations, and the kind of people the galaxy preferred to forget. No laws, no authorities, just survival and whatever deals you could make in the dark. Tyler found work in the salvage yards, using skills he'd learned in Earth's ruins. Turns out desperation makes you learn fast. He could look at a broken power coupling and just understand it somehow. See the patterns in the machinery, know which wire went where, which component had failed. The other salvagers noticed but kept their distance. Humans had a reputation now. Dangerous. Unpredictable. Best avoided. He slept in an abandoned cargo container that still had "Property of Earth Colonial Transport" stenciled on the side in faded letters. At night, he'd lie on the cold metal floor and try not to think about his parents, about the home that didn't exist anymore, about the fact that he was completely alone in a galaxy that had made it very clear he wasn't welcome anywhere. The other refugees in the scrapyard had their own communities. The Kelvins shared living spaces. The traders formed merchant collectives. Even the criminals had their gangs and hierarchies. Tyler ate alone, worked alone, and learned to ignore the stares that followed him through the market corridors. On his 14th birthday, though he was the only one who knew or cared, Tyler climbed to the highest point he could reach, the hull of a massive derelict cruiser that jutted out into space. He sat there for hours, legs dangling over the edge, looking at the stars through the shimmer of the station's failing atmospheric shield. He thought about just letting go. Just pushing off and drifting into the black. It would be quick, probably painless. And nobody would miss him because nobody even knew he existed. That's when he heard it. Not through his ears exactly, but somehow deeper. Like someone speaking directly into his mind, their voice resonating in his bones. It was deep and old, carrying weight that made Tyler's chest ache. The voice said, "Little spark of stubborn fire, why do you burn alone?" Tyler looked around wildly, but he was still alone on the hull. Yet the voice felt close, intimate, like whoever was speaking was right beside him. He tried to answer out loud, his voice cracking from disuse. "Who's there?" The voice came again, amused and ancient. "Someone who remembers when humans weren't afraid of their own fire. Come, young one. Follow my voice. It's time you learned what you really are." Tyler followed the voice through corridors he'd never noticed before, passages that seemed to shift and breathe as he walked. The other salvagers had always avoided this section of the scrapyard, muttering about bad luck and ghost ships. Now Tyler understood why. The deeper he went, the more the walls seemed alive, covered in symbols that hurt his eyes to look at directly. Some were warnings in languages dead for thousands of years. Others were seals meant to keep something contained. The voice kept guiding him, gentle but insistent. "Further, young one. Don't be afraid. I've been waiting a very long time for someone like you to find me." Tyler's heart hammered in his chest, but he kept walking. What did he have to lose? At this point, even danger felt better than the crushing loneliness he'd been living with. He climbed through access tunnels, squeezed past collapsed bulkheads, and finally emerged into a chamber that made him stop breathing. It was impossible. The derelict ship from the outside was maybe 200 meters long, but this chamber stretched for what looked like miles in every direction. The ceiling disappeared into darkness far above, and the air tasted electric, like the moment before a thunderstorm. Ancient machinery hummed along the walls, keeping this pocket of reality stable through means Tyler couldn't begin to understand. And in the center of it all, curled around himself like a cat sleeping in the sun, was a dragon. Tyler had seen dragons in old movies and video games back on Earth. But those were fairy tales, cartoons, nothing like the reality before him. This creature was the size of a city block, his scales blacker than space itself but etched with patterns that glowed faintly, constellations that Tyler somehow knew didn't exist in the night sky anymore. They'd burned out long ago, but this dragon still carried their light. One massive eye opened, and Tyler felt his knees go weak. That eye held galaxies. It held the birth and death of civilizations. It held a sadness so deep that Tyler felt tears streaming down his face without knowing why. "Hello, Tyler Brooks," the dragon said, and his voice was the same one that had called through the void. "My name is Drakenthar. I am the last of my kind, or so the galaxy believes. And you are the first human I've spoken to in 10,000 years." Tyler's voice came out as a whisper. "How do you know my name?" "I've been watching you through the quantum field since you arrived in the scrapyard. Watching you work with machinery you shouldn't understand. Watching you survive rejections that would have broken most beings. Watching you sit on that hull and contemplate ending your pain." Drakenthar's voice grew gentler. "I know that pain, young one. I know what it's like to be the last of something the galaxy no longer wants." The dragon slowly uncoiled, his movements fluid despite his massive size. As he shifted, Tyler saw scars across those obsidian scales, marks from weapons that no longer existed, battles fought in wars the history books had forgotten. "Come closer. I won't harm you. My kind made a vow long ago, before your species even discovered fire. We swore to protect humanity, to stand as their guardians and companions. Some vows outlive civilizations." Tyler found himself walking forward, drawn by something he couldn't name. Every instinct should have told him to run, but instead he felt safer than he had in years. When he got close enough, he reached out with a trembling hand and touched one of those massive scales. It was warm, radiating heat like a living star. Drakenthar made a sound like distant thunder, pleased. "Good. You still have the instinct. The Galactic Council tried to breed it out of your people, tried to make humans forget what they once were. But it's still there in your genetic memory. The bond between dragon and human." "I don't understand," Tyler said, his hand still pressed against the scale. "The galaxy says humans are dangerous. That we're too violent, too emotional. Every species I've met treats us like we're broken. Because you're not broken, and that terrifies them." Drakenthar lowered his enormous head until one eye was level with Tyler. "Let me show you something. A memory from when your ancestors walked Earth and my kind soared above them." The dragon's eye began to glow, and suddenly Tyler wasn't in the chamber anymore. He was standing on an Earth he'd never known, green and alive, with cities that blended technology and nature so seamlessly they looked like living art. And in the sky, dragons flew alongside human pilots in ships that danced through the clouds like birds. He saw humans and dragons working together, building impossible things. Quantum engines that didn't require destroying stars for fuel. Medical technology that could heal any wound. Weapons that could reshape reality itself, but were kept locked away because humans and dragons agreed some powers were too dangerous to use. He saw the bond, humans linking minds with dragons, each enhancing the other's strengths. Human creativity and emotional intensity combined with draconic wisdom and power. Together, they'd been unstoppable. Not as conquerors, but as explorers and defenders. Other species had feared them, yes, but also respected them. Then he saw the war. The Galactic Council deciding that humans with dragons were too independent, too powerful, too unwilling to follow the rules the Council had established. He saw dragons hunted, saw humans altered genetically, their warrior traits suppressed, their ability to bond with dragons severed at the DNA level. He saw Earth abandoned to its own devices, left to develop slowly, forgetting the partnership that had once made them giants among the stars. The vision faded, and Tyler was back in the chamber, tears streaming down his face. But these weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage. They lied, he said, his voice shaking. Everyone lied. They said humans were primitive, that we needed to be uplifted and civilized. But they're the ones who broke us. They're the ones who made us forget. Yes, Drakenthar said simply. And when Earth started reaching for the stars again on its own, they waited until you were vulnerable, then struck. The war that destroyed your world wasn't random. It was orchestrated to ensure humanity would need the Council's help, would be grateful enough to accept their modifications to join galactic society. Tyler felt something ignite in his chest. Not the hollow despair he'd carried for years, but actual fire. Fury at what had been stolen from his species. Determination to take it back. What do I do? Drakenthar's eye gleamed with approval. You learn. You remember what humans were meant to be. And then, young Tyler Brooks, you show this galaxy why they were right to fear us. The training began the next morning, though morning and night meant nothing in the endless dark of the scrapyard. Tyler woke curled against Drakenthar's side, warmer and more rested than he'd been in years. The dragon's breathing had been like a steady heartbeat through the night, and for the first time since losing his parents, Tyler hadn't had nightmares. Drakenthar didn't teach like the automated programs Tyler had used on Earth or the cold instructors he'd seen processing other refugees. The dragon taught through memory and experience, sharing visions directly into Tyler's mind through their growing connection. It felt strange at first, like someone was pouring warm water through his thoughts, but Tyler quickly learned to open himself to it. The first lesson was about machinery. Tyler had always been good with tech, but he thought it was just luck or desperation making him understand how things worked. Drakenthar showed him the truth. Ancient humans had possessed an intuitive grasp of quantum mechanics that the modern galaxy had lost. They could look at technology and understand it on a fundamental level, see the patterns of energy and matter that made machines work. Your people didn't just build things, Drakenthar explained as Tyler's hands moved over a broken power core, seeing connections he'd never noticed before. They understood them. Could feel the flow of energy like you feel blood moving through your veins. The council called it dangerous intuition. I call it genius. Within days, Tyler was repairing technology that other salvagers had declared unsalvageable. He fixed a gravity stabilizer that had been broken for 15 years. He got a medical scanner working using parts from 3 different species technology that supposedly weren't compatible. Word spread through the scrapyard that the human kid had skills, and suddenly people who'd avoided him were offering jobs. But the real training happened in the vast chamber with Drakenthar. The dragon taught Tyler to move differently, to fight in ways that made use of human strengths rather than trying to copy alien combat styles. Humans were smaller than most species, weaker in raw strength, but they were adaptable in ways others weren't. Watch, Drakenthar said, and created a hologram of a Kelvin warrior, 8 feet tall, 4 arms, natural armor plating. The Kelvin trained for combat in standard gravity, standard atmosphere. But humans? You evolved on a world with inconsistent environments. You can adapt to anything. Tyler learned to fight in zero gravity, using momentum and angles that worked with human flexibility. He learned pressure points on a dozen species, places where even heavily armored aliens were vulnerable. He learned to read body language across different physiologies, seeing the tells that showed when an opponent was about to strike. But more than physical skills, Drakenthar taught Tyler about what made humans special. Your emotions aren't a weakness, the dragon insisted during one session when Tyler had gotten frustrated with himself. They're your greatest weapon. Other species suppress their feelings, treat them as distractions. But human emotions create bonds that transcend logic. Drakenthar showed him memories of ancient human warriors who fought not for conquest or duty, but for love. Soldiers who found impossible strength because they were protecting someone they cared about. Healers who worked miracles because they refused to let patients die. Explorers who pushed beyond every limit because they had to know what was out there. The galaxy sees your short lifespans as a weakness, Drakenthar said. But it creates urgency. Humans accomplish in decades what takes other species centuries because you know your time is limited. You innovate, adapt, push boundaries. It's terrifying to species that have forever to make decisions. Tyler also learned the old languages, words that carried power because they described reality in ways modern tongues had forgotten. He learned to speak commands that could affect quantum fields, adjust probability, make unlikely things happen. It wasn't magic, it was understanding the universe deeply enough to ask it politely to work differently. 6 months passed. Tyler grew stronger, faster, more confident. The hollow-eyed refugee who'd wanted to drift into space was gone, replaced by someone who moved with purpose. He still worked in the salvage yards, but now he was saving money, making plans. Drakenthar was preparing him for something, though the dragon wouldn't say exactly what. Then one night, Tyler was in the market district buying supplies when he heard crying. Not alien sounds, but human sobbing. He followed it to a side corridor and found a girl around 10 years old, human, with blonde hair matted with dirt. She was trying to make herself invisible behind some cargo containers. Tyler approached slowly, hands visible. "Hey, I'm human too. It's okay. What's wrong?" The girl looked up with eyes full of terror. "They're selling us. The men with the ship. They grabbed me and some others from the processing center. Said humans fetch good prices on the labor markets because we die quick so nobody has to keep us long." Ice flooded Tyler's veins. "How many others?" 36. "All kids. The youngest is maybe 6 years old." Tyler's hands clenched into fists. He thought about walking away, about staying safe, about not drawing attention to himself. Then he thought about what Drakenthar had been teaching him. About humans who found impossible strength when protecting others. About the fierce loyalty that made his species special. He pulled out his communicator and activated the emergency beacon Drakenthar had given him months ago, the one he was supposed to use only if his life was in danger. Then he looked at the girl and smiled, trying to project a confidence he didn't quite feel. "Listen to me carefully. I'm going to get you and the others out. But I need you to be brave a little longer. Can you do that?" The girl wiped her eyes and nodded. "Good. Now take me to that ship." As they moved through the corridors, Tyler's mind raced through everything he'd learned. The combat training, the tech skills, the quantum languages, the ability to adapt and survive that was humanity's birthright. He was 14 years old, barely 100 pounds, about to take on professional slavers. But he had something they didn't expect. He had 6 months of training from the last dragon. He had the genetic memory of humans who'd once stood as equals to the stars. And he had the burning fury of someone who'd been rejected by every refuge, who knew exactly how those kids felt, and who refused to let them suffer alone. Drakenthar's voice whispered through their bond, amused and proud. "Finally. I was wondering when you'd find something worth fighting for. Show them what humans really are, young one." The slave ship was docked at the furthest edge of the scrapyard, where station security never bothered to patrol. Tyler approached it like Drakenthar had taught him, patient, observant, thinking 3 moves ahead. The girl, who told him her name was Beth, waited in a safe spot while Tyler scouted the perimeter. The ship was a modified cargo hauler, its hull scarred and patched from years of illegal runs. 2 guards stood at the main entrance, but they were relaxed, bored. They didn't expect trouble in a place like this. Nobody interfered with slave traders in the scrapyard. It was bad for business, bad for your health. Tyler found a maintenance hatch on the underside of the ship, exactly where his intuition told him it would be. 6 months ago, he wouldn't have known where to look. Now he could read a ship's design like other people read books, understanding the logic of its construction. He bypassed the electronic lock using techniques that would have taken a professional hacker hours. Tyler did it in 90 seconds. Inside, the ship was dark and cramped, filled with the hum of poorly maintained engines. Tyler moved through the corridors like a shadow, his human size an advantage in the tight spaces designed for cargo, not crew comfort. He could hear voices ahead, guards talking in the common trade language about how much they'd make from this run. 37 human kids, one said, his voice a wet gurgle that marked him as a Krillian. Boss says the mining operations in the outer reaches pay premium for humans. They work hard because they're always desperate, and when they die, you just get another one. No long-term contracts to worry about. Tyler's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached, but he kept moving. Rage could come later. Right now, he needed to be smart. He found the holding cells in the lower deck. The children were crammed into 3 cells meant for cargo, sitting in darkness with barely enough room to move. Tyler counted quickly, 37, just like Beth had said. Ages ranging from maybe 6 to 15. Some were crying quietly. Others just stared at nothing with eyes that had already given up. Tyler recognized that look. He'd seen it in the mirror not so long ago. He approached the nearest cell and whispered, "Hey. I'm human too. I'm getting you out." A boy around 12 looked up, hope and disbelief fighting on his face. "How? There's guards everywhere. The ship's about to leave." "I know. That's why we're doing this now." Tyler pulled out the tools he'd brought and started working on the cell locks. These were cheap systems, designed to hold scared kids, not skilled prisoners. "When I open these doors, I need you all to stay quiet and follow me exactly. Can you do that?" The kids nodded, and Tyler saw something shift in their expressions. They'd been abandoned by the galaxy, rejected by every refuge, but here was another human coming back for them. That meant something. Tyler got the first cell open, then the second. But as he started on the third, alarms screamed through the ship. Red lights flashed, and he heard the heavy footsteps of guards running toward the holding area. Someone had noticed the breach. "Change of plans," Tyler said, his mind racing. "Everyone, get behind me. Stay close together." The first guard rounded the corner, a massive Krillian with 4 arms and natural armor plating. He saw Tyler and the children and roared, reaching for his weapon. But Tyler was already moving, using the tight corridor to his advantage. The guard was too big to maneuver quickly in the cramped space. Tyler slid between the Krillian's legs, too fast for the alien to track, and hit a specific pressure point behind the creature's knee joint. Drakenthar had shown him exactly where every species was vulnerable. The guard went down hard, crashing into the walls. 2 more guards came, and Tyler used everything he'd learned. He wasn't trying to overpower them, he couldn't. But he could be faster, smarter, more adaptable. He used their size against them, led them into spaces where they couldn't fight effectively, hit nerve clusters that dropped them like puppets with cut strings. But there were too many. For every guard Tyler took down, 2 more appeared. He was getting tired, making mistakes. A lucky blow caught him in the ribs and sent him crashing against the wall, pain exploding through his chest. The children screamed. The guards closed in, weapons raised. Tyler struggled to his feet, putting himself between the guards and the kids. If he was going down, he'd go down fighting. That's what humans did. Then the entire ship shuddered. The lights flickered and died, replaced by emergency systems that painted everything blood red. A sound echoed through the hull, deep, ancient, full of barely contained fury. Tyler had heard that sound before, in the chamber, but never like this. Never this angry. Drakenthar's voice filled every speaker on the ship, resonating in bones and metal alike. "You dare trade in children under my protection? You dare harm my human?" The ship shuddered again, harder. Through a viewport, Tyler saw something impossible. Space itself was tearing open, reality folding like paper, and through the gap came Drakenthar. The dragon didn't fly, he simply was there, materializing next to the ship, his size making the slave hauler look like a toy. The guards forgot about Tyler and the children, staring in absolute terror at the viewport. Dragons were supposed to be extinct, legends from dead worlds. But here was one very much alive, and very much furious. "Tyler," Drakenthar's voice came through their bond, gentle despite his rage. "Get the children to the maintenance hatch. I've positioned myself beneath it. Bring them to my wing." Tyler didn't waste time asking how. He grabbed Beth's hand and started moving, the other children following. Behind them, he heard the guards panicking, shouting into communicators, begging their captain to do something. The captain apparently decided to do something very stupid. The ship's weapons powered up, targeting Drakenthar. Tyler felt the dragon's amusement through their bond. "Oh, little thieves," Drakenthar said, his voice carrying across every frequency. "You truly don't understand what you're facing." The weapons fired, plasma cannons that could vaporize an asteroid. But they never reached Drakenthar. The dragon simply gestured with one claw, and space bent around him, the weapon's fire curving away harmlessly into the void. Then Drakenthar did something that made Tyler's eyes water to watch. The dragon's scales lit up with the light of dead stars, and quantum locks appeared around 5 other ships that had been approaching, reinforcements the slavers had called. The ships just stopped, frozen in space like insects in amber. Tyler got the children to the maintenance hatch and looked down. Drakenthar had positioned himself perfectly, one massive wing extended flat beneath the ship. "Jump," Tyler said. "Trust me. That dragon is a friend." One by one, the children jumped, landing on scales that were warm and solid. Tyler went last, and the moment his feet touched Drakenthar's wing, he felt the dragon's pride and relief wash through their bond. "All here?" Drakenthar asked. "All here," Tyler confirmed. "Good. Hold on." Reality folded, and suddenly they were back in the vast chamber, all 37 children and Tyler standing safely on solid ground. Through the quantum connection Drakenthar maintained, Tyler could still see the scrapyard, could see the slave ship surrounded by frozen reinforcements. The entire station was watching. Every species, every gang, every authority that usually looked the other way. They were all seeing the same thing: a human boy had challenged slave traders, and a dragon thought dead for millennia had come to his defense. Drakenthar's voice echoed across the scrapyard one more time. "Let this be known across all space. These humans are under my protection. This boy is under my wing. Any who would harm them will answer to powers your civilization has forgotten how to fear." The children refused to leave after that first night. Tyler had expected them to be scared of Drakenthar. He was a massive dragon after all, something from nightmares and ancient stories. But kids saw the world differently than adults. They didn't care about legends or impossibilities. They just knew that this dragon had saved them when nobody else would. Little Beth appointed herself as Tyler's assistant, following him everywhere as he showed the other kids around the vast chamber. A boy named Connor, who was 13 and had watched his entire family die in the Earth bombardment, started helping Tyler repair equipment. Two sisters, Amy and Lisa, began organizing sleeping areas using salvaged materials from the scrapyard. Within a week, the impossible chamber felt less like a dragon's lair and more like a home. The children laughed again, something Tyler hadn't heard in so long it made his chest ache. They played games in the enormous space, their voices echoing off walls that had been silent for 10,000 years. And every night, they slept curled against Drakenthar's warm scales, finally safe. But word of what happened spread faster than light across the quantum networks. Within days, more refugees started appearing at the entrance to Drakenthar's ship. These weren't the ones seeking any refuge they could find. These were the ones who'd been rejected for being too different, too broken, too dangerous. A Kelvin scientist arrived, his natural armor scarred from torture because he'd questioned his government's policies. A Threnody who'd been severed from the hive mind for thinking independent thoughts. A family of Valorians whose crystalline bodies had mutations that made them outcasts. Even a few adult humans who'd heard rumors that one of their own had found sanctuary with a dragon. Drakenthar welcomed them all. The chamber seemed to expand to accommodate them, space folding in ways that hurt to think about too hard. The dragon explained that his ship existed partially outside normal reality, its interior dimensions limited only by the power he fed into it. And after 10,000 years of sleep, he had power to spare. Tyler found himself becoming something he'd never imagined, a leader. The refugees looked to him for guidance because he was Drakenthar's chosen, the human who'd earned a dragon's protection. At 15 years old, Tyler was organizing supply runs, mediating disputes between species, and teaching others the skills Drakenthar had taught him. The Galactic Council noticed, of course. 3 months after the slave ship incident, a delegation arrived at the scrapyard in a gleaming diplomatic vessel. They came with official documents, legal arguments, and thinly veiled threats. Tyler met them in a neutral docking bay, with Drakenthar's massive form visible through the viewport behind him. The head diplomat was a Valorian administrator named Crystal Overdawn, her body refracting light in patterns meant to convey authority. She looked at Tyler with barely concealed disgust. "The council has granted this audience as a courtesy. You are harboring individuals who require proper processing and integration into galactic society. Particularly the human children, who need specialized care." Specialized care? Tyler kept his voice level, though anger burned in his gut. "You mean the genetic modifications? The neural adjustments to make us less emotional, less aggressive, less human?" Crystal Overdawn's light patterns flickered, surprised that he knew. "The optimization process is for humanity's benefit. Your species' natural state is incompatible with civilized society. We learned this lesson millennia ago. Unmodified humans are simply too dangerous." "Dangerous to whom?" Drakenthar's voice rumbled through the docking bay, making the diplomatic vessel shake. "To yourselves, perhaps. You fear what you cannot control." The diplomat's composure cracked slightly. "With respect, Drakenthar, your kind's alliance with ancient humanity was precisely why both species had to be managed. Together, you were a destabilizing force. Dragons bonded with humans created power structures that ignored council authority. Ignored tyranny, you mean? Tyler said. I've seen the records. The ones you thought were destroyed. Humans and dragons didn't conquer, we protected. We stood between the council and species you wanted to exploit. We asked inconvenient questions about why some civilizations prospered while others starved. We couldn't be bought or threatened. Crystal Overdawn's lights turned sharp, aggressive. Ancient history. The current reality is that you are holding individuals who legally must submit to council processing. If you refuse to comply, we will be forced to take action. Then take it, Tyler said simply. But know what you're starting. Drakenthar shifted behind him, and suddenly the viewport filled with something impossible. Other ships were appearing in the space around the scrapyard, not through normal travel, but folding into reality the way Drakenthar had. Massive vessels, their hulls covered in scales that glowed with starlight. Each one carried a dragon. Did you truly believe I was the last? Drakenthar's voice carried amusement and warning in equal measure. We withdrew from the galaxy because we grew tired of your politics. We slept, waiting for a time when our partnership with humanity might be restored. Tyler has shown us that time has come. Tyler counted the ships appearing. 7, 9, 15. Each one carrying a dragon that the galaxy had declared extinct. The council delegation's vessel looked like a child's toy among them. Crystal Overdawn's light patterns went chaotic with fear. This is an act of war. No, Tyler said. This is a choice. The council can continue forcing humans into compliance, hunting down our children, suppressing what we are. And you can face dragons who remember why they loved humanity enough to bond with us. Or you can acknowledge that humans deserve the same right as any species, to choose our own path. The negotiation took 3 days. Tyler stood his ground through all of it, backed by Drakenthar's ancient wisdom and the presence of dragons that made the council's military might look insignificant. In the end, they reached an agreement that changed the galaxy. Humans could choose. Those who wanted to join the council's structured society could undergo the modifications and receive all the benefits of citizenship. But those who refused had the right to live free, to remember their heritage, to reclaim the partnership with dragons that had been stolen from them. Tyler's sanctuary became the first free human settlement in 10,000 years. More humans found their way there, some from Earth's ruins, others from hidden refugee camps, a few who'd already been modified but wanted to reconnect with what they'd lost. Dragons came too, emerging from hiding places across the galaxy, drawn by the rekindling of bonds they'd thought lost forever. Beth, the first child Tyler had saved, grew into a fierce advocate for human rights. Connor became a master of the old technologies, teaching others the quantum intuition that was humanity's birthright. The sanctuary expanded, becoming a city, then a fleet of ships, then a network of settlements where humans and dragons built something new together. 5 years after that first night when Tyler had heard Drakenthar's voice calling through the void, he stood on the observation deck of a ship called Hope's Fire. Around him, dozens of other vessels traveled together, humans and dragons and the aliens who joined them, species tired of the council's control. Drakenthar's voice came through their bond, warm with pride. You've done well, little spark. From a rejected orphan to the founder of a new age. How does it feel? Tyler thought about the boy he'd been, hollow-eyed and ready to drift into space. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, every rejection, every moment of despair, every impossible choice. And he thought about the children sleeping safely in quarters below, human kids who would grow up knowing what they truly were, never having to hide their fire. It feels like coming home, Tyler said. Finally. Drakenthar's wing, vast enough to shelter a city, curved around the ship in a gesture of protection that had become familiar over the years. Through their bond, Tyler felt the dragon's contentment, his satisfaction at a vow kept after millennia of waiting. The galaxy had rejected humanity as too dangerous, too emotional, too unpredictable. They tried to break what made humans special, to suppress the fire that let them bond with dragons and build impossible dreams. But fire, Tyler had learned, couldn't be extinguished. It could only be hidden, waiting for the right moment to burn bright again. And now, sheltered under a dragon's wing, humanity's flame was spreading across the stars, reminding the galaxy why they'd been feared, respected, and ultimately, unstoppable. Tyler smiled, watching the stars stream past, and knew his parents would be proud. He'd kept his promise. He'd survived. But more than that, he'd helped his entire species remember how to truly live.